Hello, bros. We're back with Trousered Apes, Sick Literature in a Sick Society by Duncan Williams, Chapter 8. The last chapter, though there is an epilogue. I hope I do not give the impression of being opposed to contemporary youth or hate or fearful of it. What I do fear is power divorced from understanding, power allied to ignorance, power in the hands of secular activists. As an example, a recent French film, La Chinoise, portrays a young Maoist student whose consuming ambition is to blow up and totally destroy the Sorbonne. An elderly man, a Marxist and formerly a fighter for Algerian independence, questions her motives. He points out that she is under no compulsion to attend the university and that her plan for its destruction has the support of only a minority of her contemporaries. It transpires in the course of their conversation that there is nothing she wishes to build in place of the Sorbonne, and that her real motives are frivolously romantic. She simply wants to act the part of a revolutionary, to ape the lifestyle, and there's the dryer done, the lifestyle of her heroes, and she is not in the least concerned with the consequences of her actions. As another example of juvenile delinquency masquerading as revolution, one might cite Abby Hoffman's Revolution for the Hell of It. Clearly, some of the demands which are currently being made on university authorities throughout the world are similarly motivated and are aimed less at the alleged improvement of educational standards than at the destruction of both the standards and the institutions. Cardinal Newman defined a great intellect as one which takes a connected view of old and new, past and present, far and near, and which has an insight into the influences of all these one on another. Obviously, all students cannot be great intellects, but many are capable of developing an ability to take the connected view necessary to reach an understanding of the problems confronting modern man. The contemporary revolutionary mind is hostile to such an understanding, partly because since all cannot attain it, it is non egalitarian. Moreover, a truly educated man is far too aware of the complexities of life to assume that there is any single or simple solution, whereas the revolutionary is always convinced that such a solution exists. In describing the danger, I cannot do better than quote Burke's words of almost 200 years ago in characterizing those who conceived and instigated the French revolutions. Revolution. They have no respect for the wisdom of others, but they pay it off by a very full measure of confidence in their own. With them, it is a sufficient motive to destroy an old scheme of things because it is an old one. As to the new, they are in no sort of fear with regard to the duration of a building run up in haste, because duration is no object to those who think little or nothing has been done before their time and who place all their hopes in discovery. They conceive very systematically that all things which give perpetuity are mischievous and therefore are at an inexpiable war with all establishments. This is a most accurate description of what I have referred to throughout this book as temporal provincialism, and nothing can be more antithetical to Newman's concept of a great intellect. Since it is the duty and purpose of universities to foster a connected view of human knowledge, they will increasingly become the targets of the contemporary worldwide proletarian and youthful revolutionary movement, a movement which, misquoting Wilde, might be described as the ignorant in full pursuit of ignorance. A footnote is, it may be recalled that Arnold, aware of the diminishing power of religion, attempted to substitute culture for it, believing that only in this way could anarchy be averted. The contemporary rejection of both religion and culture appears to be producing that anarchical state which Arnold dreaded. A system of higher education which results in mere literacy is a social crime, since it allows its recipients to think they understand the forces shaping world history when they are only in possession of a number of unrelated and isolated facts. If mass education at university level is worth pursuing, its products must be able to read and understand such writers as Spengler, Ortega, and Toynbee. It is not enough for a minority to be acquainted with the nature and extent of the crisis confronting contemporary man. If both the African peasant and the Western university educated youth are equally ignorant of the awesome specter of the possible decline and fall of mankind, then there is little hope for the future. So far, I have assumed that writers and other creative artists are free agents, exercising their talents in a volitional manner, and have opposed the alternative assumption because it results in a historical determinism and ultimately an acceptance of total relativism. However, Ezra Pound has called the artist the antenna of the human race, and Marshall McLuhan defines art as a radar which acts as an early alarm system, enabling us to discover social and psychic targets in lots of time to prepare to cope with them. Both writers imply that the creative artist, because of his greater sensitivity, is more aware than other men of the trends in his contemporary society, which will shape the future. The artist is thus regarded as a prophet or seer. If we accept this view, then what future is presaged by contemporary art, saturated as it is with violence and animalism, and with the death-oriented hopelessness which characterizes the avant-garde? All species which formerly inhabited the earth had a cyclical pattern of youth, maturity, decay, and eventual extinction. Does the death-oriented hopelessness signify and forebode not just the decline of Western man, but the decline and abolition of mankind? That glare is annoying. The problem is more profound than Spengler, Trilling, or Fiedler realize, although the titles of their respective books, The Decline of the West, Beyond Culture, Waiting for the End, do indicate an awareness of a crisis in life and literature, although they all see it as basically a provincial crisis, applicable only to the West. I am not of this opinion. Civilization has, after all, been a heartbreakingly slow process. It has been accomplished through man's gradual realization that in bodily functions, eating, drinking, copulating, excreting, he differs little from the ape. It was his reasoning ability, his self-control, his affectations which raised him to the dignity of Homo sapiens. The contemporary tendency to reject these necessary repressive concepts may betoken an inevitable cyclical fall of man. Water pollution and air pollution are now quantitatively measurable facts of life, but it also appears that an insidious psychological poison is permeating the modern consciousness, destroying man's mind and moral fiber, leading him back to the primitive jungle from whence he came before that same jungle, devoid of civilized man, and Trousered Ape returns to its pristine state, the only ultimate victor. If this is so, then the destructiveness which characterizes the work of so many contemporary artists may be seen as a catalytic impulse. If the final result of human history is to be the inevitable decline and fall of the species, then the artist responding in a vatic or prophetic fashion with a psychic awareness to this knowledge, apprehended rather than comprehended, will anticipate and even hasten this end. In this respect, the artist may be compared to a locomotive. When the train is proceeding up a gradient, the locomotive will pull upwards. Similarly, when mankind was progressing, the great writers, acting as catalysts, produced works which sustained and elevated men. If we are now experiencing regression, the artist, like a locomotive pulling a train downhill, will produce works in which man is induced to despair and in which he is depicted either as a helpless victim or as a passionate and violent creature devoid of dignity or significance. Since this result follows with a deterministic attitude, what hope there is arises from a repudiation of such determinism. Man differs from all those species which have previously become extinct in that, through the exercise of conceptual ability, he alone is able to envisage where he stands on the cyclical arc. With this knowledge, it is possible for him to take steps to avert his extermination. And this is the challenge confronting all men today, particularly writers, dramatists, and other artists. They can either collaborate with the enemy and hasten the destruction of themselves and society, or they can, while not indulging in facile escapism, return to a delineation of an idea towards which man can strive. A lack of an understanding of the critical nature of contemporary problems constitutes a major threat to survival. As a society, we are so much better at doing than we are at understanding the consequences of our actions. Our technical ability is unlimited. We can move mountains and make the desert blossom as the rose. We have, in fact, too much technical ability and too much factual knowledge for our culture to absorb. And so we are packing knowledge into computers in the hope that they will solve the problems for us. Computers are awesome, impressive objects. They can store millions of facts effortlessly in their brains, but they do not understand in human terms one of the facts which they hoard. There lies their weakness, and there also lies man's folly if he abdicates his responsibility and allows them to do his thinking for him. A world dominated by statistics is a poor substitute for one of understanding and of the compassion which comes from such an understanding, but occasionally statistics are of assistance in providing an insight into the nature of the contemporary crisis. In the next 4 years, the population of the world will increase by approximately 300 million, 190,000 a day. And this figure takes into account the number of deaths, stillbirths, and so on. In other words, 1.5 times as many people as currently inhabit the United States will have been added to the world's population in this short period. Commenting on these figures, Julian Huxley observes that if nothing is done to control this increase, mankind will drown in its own flood, or if you prefer another metaphor, man will turn into the cancer of the planet. Recently, a play, Little Murders, was staged with only limited success in New York and London. The action of the play takes place in some undefined future, and the populace is depicted as engaged in random and irrational killings. No one dares to venture out of doors, and the city has become a place of siege, with mass violence occurring everywhere. Footnote 1. One recalls Eliot's view of the future, quoted earlier, internecine fighting, people killing one another in the streets. I believe that the playwright Jules Feiffer is anticipating a very real and horrifying possibility. From an examination of other species in overcrowded conditions, we know that such overcrowding results in a form of mass psychosis. Previously, docile creatures attack and kill each other, even though still provided with an abundance of food. There is no reason to assume that man is an exception to this phenomenon, and it is surely significant that mass, often irrational violence almost invariably occurs in the cities, where overcrowding and slum conditions conspire to bring about conditions parallel to those observed with the experiments with animals. Man has learned to control death before he has learned to control birth. And far more than most people yet realize, we desperately need a sane and cohesive world population plan. Whoa! I mean, you got abortion now, so. As the economist Kenneth Boulding has stated, we are all guilty of ignorance, frivolity, and blindness, and the accusing fingers of billions of the unborn are pointed angrily towards us. Arnold Toynbee also makes the following observation on this same problem. The issue is indeed a religious one in the sense that it raises the question, what is the true end of man? Is it to populate the earth with the maximum number of human beings, or is it to enable human beings to lead the best kind of life that the spiritual limitations of human nature allow? although we have yet to devise an instrument capable of measuring the psychic temperament of a generation or of any particular historical epoch. The spectacle of ever growing numbers increasingly demanding equal shares in a world where space, food, and consequently the opportunity to live a life of human dignity and significance are all rapidly diminishing, can only spell total and unrelieved strife and unrest in the years ahead. And the children of today's demonstrators may, in the 1980s, shoulder banners proclaiming the message, make war, not love. These are the major problems confronting contemporary man. The overwhelming nature and complexity of them may tempt some to seek the question of the quietism of despair to adopt the hippie creed. Tune in, turn out, drop out. No, let me read it again. Tune in, turn on, drop out. This is not devoid of a certain appeal, but the problems will not disappear if we simply attempt to ignore their existence. Man will prevail, to use Faulkner's words, only if he confronts such problems resolutely and honestly, in a manner best expressed by Tennyson in Ulysses. Though much is taken, much abides, and though we are not now that strength which in old days moved heaven and earth, that which we are one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. To deny such an idea, to emphasize man's primitivism, to ignite his baser passions, to question his capacity for sympathy and empathy, in short, to depict him as merely a trousered ape is not only a form of literary, aesthetic, and philosophic dishonesty, it is a sin against life itself, a crime against humanity. And that's the end of that chapter. And we have an epilogue left, which is about how many pages? About 9 pages. We will resume there on the next rendering of this book. And then it will be done. Trousered Apes. Goodbye, bruv. Goodbye.